In 2003, Councillor Nick Worth did not stand for re-election to Holbeach Parish Council. At the council meeting of the 12th of May 2003, Councillor John Pearl was elected Chairman of Allotments, a position that he had previously held. It was Councillor Pearl who had proposed that the council accepted Councillor Worth's report of October 2000, the Enigma report as I call it, and subsequently Councillor Pearl was written to and asked him to substantiate the claims made in Councillor Worth's report, because I called it a pack of lies. The clerk of Holbeach Parish Council wrote to me and told me I should raise my questions in the open forum. But previously I'd raised questions in the open forum regarding the report and been told that the report was quite specific. I should take my allegations to the district auditor, and that would be the end of the matter. At the July council meeting of 2003, Councillor Pearl announced he wished to resign as Chairman of Allotments, and Councillor Don Scott was duly appointed in his place. The council agreed to ask the clerk to contact the Crown regarding the Holbeach Bank allotments and ask them for a site meeting because the Parish Council were not happy. September 2003, the clerk reported that she had written to Carter Jonas asking them to contact Councillor Don Scott. October, Councillor Scott was to report he had not heard from Carter Jonas. May 2004, Councillor Scott was advised Mr Hicks was erecting a fence on the grass roadway at the rear of his property. At the May council meeting, Councillor Scott reported that he had been in correspondence with Paul Poll and was awaiting some information. 21st of May 2004, the allotment inspection is done. The comments regarding Crownfield Bank are very well maintained. Councillors looked at narrow access strip that allows house owners to access the rear of properties. Recognised potential for unclear boundaries. Councillor Scott commented that he was awaiting an email from Mr Alan Palmer with clarifications of house owners' concerns. Noted that main entrance appeared to be unused recently, but the narrow access strip he refers to is the main entranceway. At the same meeting, it is reported that Mr Palmer had been burgled again, gaining access at the back. Councillor Scott reported that he had spoken with him and was awaiting information. July, Councillor Scott reports that he is meeting with Mr Palmer and would be contacting the Crown. November 2004, Councillor Scott reported that the Crown agents had met one of the residents where there was a dispute and a letter was awaited from them. On the 6th of January 2005, Mr Palmer, Mr Bramley and Councillor Scott met to look at the roadway. Mr Palmer was to remove his Leylandii hedge and put it at the entranceway so that access could not be used down the roadway. At the council meeting of January 2005, Councillor Scott reported that he had met with the Crown's rep and Mr Palmer. A letter had been received from the Crown's agents. Members agreed that a lease be drawn up, with the leaseholder paying the Parish Council's costs. Councillor Scott was awaiting for confirmation from the Crown. Members agreed that the unused access be closed. The lease is understood to refer to a right-of-way over the Parish Council's vast allotment roadway, which adjoins the Crown allotment land. This is to compensate the loss of the entranceway. It is understood councillors thought they were voting to close the access via a gate, not to lose it permanently into Mr Palmer's garden. When the fence was erected, Mr Pole's bulb rows were run on. In some places the bulb rows had been dug into and the soil and the bulbs taken. Waste was left on the field, including concrete, and a cracked concrete post was just left behind. Councillor Scott was contacted about the damage, and he told Mr Pole that he should not have planted his daffodils so close to the boundary. Councillor Scott was told that was not the boundary where the fence had been erected. Councillor Scott had previously negotiated with the householder, and the council had granted the householder a right of way over the Bass's allotment roadway. There was 3 tenants on the Bass's allotments, including Mr Pole. All 3 were unhappy about the situation of having to open and shut gates at the request of the householder. After consultation with the fellow tenants, Mr Pole placed a potato harvester on the entranceway of the Bass allotments, closing that entrance. The clerk of the council sent a letter to Mr Pole telling him to remove the potato harvester as it was blocking the access for South Holland Internal Drainage Board. The Drainage Board did not use that roadway, and after checking with the Drainage Board, the clerk was informed. So Councillor Scott was to then send a letter dated the 3rd of April 2005. We must reiterate that the potato harvester must be removed immediately. Your lease agreement does not give you any other right than the right of access to pass over that allotment roadway, and certainly not to store or park any equipment or machinery there. So why had he let Mr Palmer leave a car parked on the allotment roadway all those years? His comment, "It seems a pity you failed to communicate with your landlord with whom you have a lease agreement," was his undoing. He had not communicated with me, and I had not signed a deed of release for what was now in Mr Palmer's garden. The council invited me to a special meeting, and the potato harvester was removed. At the meeting, Mr Pole showed the councillors letters previously stating where the boundary was, plans which had accompanied the letters, and supported this with photographs. Councillor Scott was to reveal then that he was not present at the meeting when the back boundary was decided. He thought the meeting had finished and had left. It was suggested that Mr Pole should contact Richard Bramley at Carter Jonas directly. Mr Pole contacted Richard Bramley that afternoon and asked Richard if he had given permission for the fence, to which he said yes. Asked why he had given permission for the fence, he said because Mr Palmer wished to put his fence up in line with his neighbours. And when asked how his neighbour's fence got there, he said, well, Tim, his boss, had given permission for it. When asked if he'd got that in writing, he said no. Why? Was there a problem with the fence? Mr Pole replied, yes, I've got it in writing that that is not the boundary. It was agreed that Mr Bramley would meet Mr Pole for a meeting to discuss it on site, but no meeting was to ever take place. At the May Council meeting, minutes were circulated to members regarding the meeting between councillors and Mr Pole. Councillor Scott informed members that he had spoken to the Crown regarding the Crownfield Bank allotments boundary dispute, but what was said to the agent was not recorded. Members agreed that the clerk write as well. June, the clerk was to report that she had written to the Crown's agents as instructed. August, the clerk reported that no reply had been received from the Crown and agreed that a reminder be sent. September, the clerk reported that no reply had been received from the Crown following the reminder. March 2006. At the annual council meeting at the Church Hall, Mr. Poll admitted to parking the potato harvester on the Bass's allotment roadway. He then asked the chairman, Councillor Mayle, if the clerk had been instructed to write to the owner of the sugar beet harvester parked on Bass's allotment roadway. The chairman looked at his vice chair, Councillor Scott, and Councillor Scott, in his position as chairman of allotments, stood up and said that was news to him. He knew nothing of a sugar beet harvester parked on the Bass's allotment roadway. Mr. Poll replied, well, that is surprising. Last year when the potato harvester was on the roadway, you was claiming it was obstructing you inspecting the allotments. Considering the sugar beet harvester has been parked there since November and it's now March, you do not go down inspecting the allotments very often, do you?